Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open an absolute Silicon Valley classic. It's a highly practical management Bible written by a true tech legend. And honestly, we're about to fundamentally change the way you look at your daily work. Let's get right into it. So, let's kick things off with a kind of weird question. What exactly does making a perfectly cooked, soft-boiled egg have to do with how many prisons we build as a society? It sounds like a total riddle, right? Well, the answer to this actually unlocks the secret to scaling up massive societal or even corporate systems without wasting millions of dollars. The answer to that riddle is buried inside this legendary book, High Output Management. It was written by Andy Grove. If you don't know him, Grove was this brilliant Hungarian immigrant. He arrived in the US speaking zero English, had almost no money, and yet eventually became the legendary CEO of Intel. What's amazing about him is his vibe. He wasn't your typical executive in a tailored designer suit striking a power pose. The guy literally wore his work key card clipped right to his belt. That was Andy Grove in a nutshell. Just pure substance and absolutely no fluff.
Just to give you a sense of how intensely practical this guy was, there's this fantastic story from venture capitalist Ben Horowitz. Grove loved reading, right? But he eventually ran out of shelf space at his house. Now, instead of buying a bigger house or just throwing away the books that authors had written nice, personalized notes in, he systematically went through his entire collection. He actually tore out the inscription pages, kept all those nice notes in a little stack, and then threw the physical books away just to make room for what he considered truly good books. Pragmatic, intense, and radically efficient.
Which brings us right to the absolute core of our explainer today. Grove defined management using this exact equation. So the absolute crucial takeaway here is that your value as a manager isn't just what you do individually. It's not about how smart you are or how fast you can code or how great you are at sales. Your output is precisely how you leverage your entire team's output. If your deep, personal knowledge of a product doesn't directly translate into increasing your team's performance, well, it's worth exactly nothing.
So how do we actually pull that off in the real world? Grove uses this amazing, super relatable metaphor to show us how to maximize output. Imagine dropping right into the shoes of a waiter at a busy restaurant. Your mission is simple. Deliver a specific breakfast consisting of 1 3-minute soft-boiled egg, buttered toast, and coffee. The catch? You have to deliver all 3 of these components simultaneously, and every single one of them has to be fresh and piping hot. How do you pull this off without it turning into total chaos?
If you just start throwing everything together at once and hoping for the best, it's going to be a disaster. You have to look at the underlying logic. The coffee is already steaming in the pot. The toast takes maybe a minute. But that egg takes exactly 3 minutes to boil. Because it takes the longest, the egg becomes your pacing mechanism. In the manufacturing world, they call this the limiting step. It literally dictates the entire shape and timing of your operation. Once you pinpoint this limiting step, you actually build your entire workflow backwards from it. You calculate the proper time offsets. You drop the egg in first. Then you wait. 2 minutes go by, and then you drop the bread into the toaster. Finally, you pour the coffee. By staggering your actions based around that limiting step, everything finishes at the exact same perfect moment.
But wait, what if we introduce a real-world complication? What if there's suddenly a line for the toaster? All of a sudden, your perfect 3-minute egg turns into a 6-minute rubbery disaster while you wait your turn to toast the bread. The toaster completely shifts your limiting step, so you, the manager, or the waiter in this case, must radically rework the entire production process around this brand new bottleneck to avoid completely ruining the breakfast.
Now, let's say your restaurant goes viral and becomes a massive hit. You might want to scale up to a high-volume factory operation. You go out and buy this beautiful, industrial, continuous egg boiler. It churns out a constant, completely predictable supply of 3-minute eggs. But notice the trade-off here. You are basically trading customized flexibility, like if a customer suddenly wants a 4-minute egg, for significantly lower costs and highly predictable, continuous quality.
Whether you're running a diner or a mega factory, Grove says it all boils down to 3 fundamental steps of production. First is process, which is physically or chemically changing something, like boiling the raw egg. Second is assembly, putting the components together to form something new, like plating the meal. And third is test, which is that quick visual check you do to make sure the coffee is actually steaming and the toast is properly brown before you hand it off to the customer.
Now, I know what you're probably thinking. I work at a desk, I don't cook eggs for a living. But this is where Grove's genius truly shines. These exact same factory principles apply directly to knowledge work. Think about it. Are you training a sales force? You're basically processing raw data into a strategy, assembling it into a pitch, and testing it with a dry run. Building complex software? Same thing. You process code, assemble it into a compiler, and run a system test.
It is literally the exact same factory floor, just using different raw materials. And since we're basically operating a factory floor, there's a golden rule of production you absolutely have to follow. You must detect and fix problems at the lowest value stage possible, meaning right at the beginning. Think back to our breakfast factory. If a rotten or cracked egg shows up at your delivery dock, you reject it immediately. You don't boil it, assemble it on a nice plate, and then let the paying customer find it. The further a defective piece of material travels down your assembly line, the more wildly expensive it becomes to fix.
To really hammer home what happens when you ignore this rule, Grove brings up a mind-blowing example from the real world, the criminal justice system. Think about this number, $1 million. That was Grove's estimated cost of securing a single criminal conviction. Why is it so astronomically high? Because the justice system is a production process where massive volumes of cases are processed, investigated, and tried, only for a huge percentage of them to completely fall apart or be dismissed very late in the system. And all that invested labor just goes down the drain.
This completely exposes what happens when you misidentify your limiting step. Securing a conviction costs over $1 million. Building a jail cell? Maybe $80,000. Yet, society often lets convicted criminals out early simply because we don't have enough jail cells. Think about that. We let an $80,000 step completely ruin the output of a $1 million investment. By not managing the true limiting step, we are vastly misusing our societal investments.
So how on earth do you actually manage massive, complex systems like that, whether it's a justice system, a software rollout, or just our diner, without literally doing all the physical labor yourself? Grove introduces this concept called the black box. You pour raw materials and labor into this box, and out pops your product. But the ultimate challenge for every manager is this: how do you actually know what's happening inside that box if you aren't in there doing the manual work?
The answer? You need indicators. You have to essentially cut windows into that black box. As the factory manager, you obviously can't be everywhere at once, so you have to look at very specific daily measurements the second you get to the office. We're talking daily sales forecasts, raw material inventory, the condition of your equipment, customer complaint logs. These indicators are what let you see inside the box, so you can fix tiny problems before they explode into full-blown disasters later in the day.
But watch out, because there's a massive psychological trap hiding right here. People naturally overreact to single metrics. Say you tell your team to minimize inventory costs. Well, they might drive those inventories so incredibly lean that you run out of eggs entirely and can't serve your customers. So the absolutely crucial point here is that a manager must use paired indicators. You always have to balance an effect with a counter effect. If you measure quantity, like inventory levels, you have to simultaneously measure quality, like the incidence of shortages.
And if you're thinking, well, my department is too creative or too administrative to measure, Grove completely calls bluff on that. This applies to white-collar and non-manufacturing jobs, too. He proved that even administrative functions can be measured with factory-level precision. For example, accounts payable is measured by the physical number of vouchers processed, and you pair that with a quality metric like errors found. A custodial team, measured by square feet cleaned, paired with an office manager's quality rating. Every single thing can and must be measured by its true output.
I want to bring this right back down to you personally, because Grove's philosophy isn't just for Silicon Valley executives. Even if you don't manage some massive global division, even if you are just managing your own desk right now, you are the micro-CEO of your own output. You are competing with millions of incredibly capable people all over the globe. You've got to treat your career and your daily workflow with the exact same rigor that Intel treats its multi-billion-dollar microchip factories.
Now, as a micro-CEO, you're inevitably gonna run into underperformance, whether it's the people around you or people reporting to you. Grove had this brilliantly simple realization. If an employee isn't doing their job, there are only two possible reasons. It's not some deep psychological mystery. They are either incapable of doing it or they are unmotivated to do it. Put simply, they either can't do it or they won't do it.
Since there are literally only two reasons someone fails, it makes sense that you strictly have two tools to fix it. If the employee is incapable, your tool is training. If they are unmotivated, your tool is motivation. That's it. As a manager, these are quite literally the only two levers you can pull to actually affect change and boost your team's output.
Which brings us to one of Grove's most passionate, absolute non-negotiable rules. Training is the boss's job. So many managers in the knowledge economy think, oh, my employees are so smart, they don't need training. Or they just assume HR is going to handle it. But think about it, if training and motivation are your absolute highest leverage activities, delegating training means you are actively neglecting half of your actual job. We've covered a ton of ground today, all the way from boiling eggs to million-dollar prison systems to piercing the black box. So I want to leave you with Andy Grove's ultimate challenge. Take a hard look at your daily tasks and honestly ask yourself, are you adding real value or are you merely passing information along? Are you actually increasing your organization's output today? Think about that as you go out and build your own personal factory tomorrow. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.